The 48th floor of Nextlara Tower smelled of cold glass and money. Outside, San Francisco bled into fog. Inside, a single sheet of paper slid across a black walnut desk and stopped beneath Ryan Callahan's fingers. Termination. Effective immediately. Across from him sat Claire Weston, 34, the youngest female billionaire in tech, her eyes the color of winter. The reason printed in cold font was almost laughable. He left the office at 5:30 every evening without fail, to pick up a 6-year-old boy with asthma from an after-school program in Oakland. Ryan did not beg, did not raise his voice, did not threaten a lawyer. He stood, lifted his coat, and said one sentence, quiet, steady, impossible to forget. And the woman who had broken harder men than him went pale. 12 hours before the paper slid across the walnut desk, dawn in Oakland was a flat gray light pushing through the kitchen window of apartment 207. Ryan Callahan stood at the stove in a t-shirt and old jeans, stirring oatmeal with one hand and holding a plastic inhaler spacer with the other. On a stool at the counter, Noah swung his small feet in the air, already breathing in the 2 measured puffs of rescue medicine that the doctor had prescribed every morning and every night, without exception. Ryan had not missed a dose in 3 years, not since the February night Noah's mother, Elaine, had died in a hospital bed that smelled of disinfectant and grocery store roses, her hand still warm in his. Ovarian cancer stage 4 by the time they caught it. 7 months from diagnosis to goodbye. People at Nextlara did not know any of this. Or rather, one person at Nextlara did, and she kept the file in a locked drawer on the 48th floor. To everyone else, Ryan Callahan was the quiet engineer on the back-end infrastructure team, the one who wrote clean code, closed his tickets on time, and left every evening at 5:30 on the dot. They also knew, in the way open offices always know, that leaving at 5:30 in a company like Nextlara was a kind of slow suicide. He walked Noah the 3 blocks to Roosevelt Elementary, watched until the small backpack disappeared through the front doors, and then drove across the Bay Bridge toward a tower that caught the morning light like a blade. Nextlara occupied 49 floors of glass and steel in the financial district. Ryan's desk was on the 22nd, in a quiet corner, where the engineers joked that the carpet still smelled like the last man who had burned out. He had been there 7 months. 7 months of delivering above expectation, 7 months of polite nods in the elevator. 7 months of a single unspoken rule: he would not be the man who came home after bedtime. At 4:47 that afternoon, his internal messenger chimed. The message came from an assistant he had never spoken to. "Ms. Weston would like to see you. 48th floor. 5 o'clock. Ryan read it twice. His thumb hovered over the keyboard. In 7 months, he had never been on the 48th floor. No engineer at his level had. The 48th floor was Claire Weston's kingdom, the CEO. The co-founder, the woman whose face had been on the cover of 3 business magazines before she turned 30. He typed back one word. Understood. Then he picked up his coat from the back of the chair, because somehow, without being told, he already knew he would not be coming back down to his desk. The elevator ride was a slow climb through other people's lives. Floor 30 sales, floor 35 product, floor 42 legal. With each ascent, the voices in his head grew louder. Rent was due in 8 days. Noah's pulmonology appointment was on Friday. The health insurance through Nextlara covered 85% of the inhalers. Without it, a single month of medication cost more than the electric bill. The doors opened onto silence. The 48th floor was not an office. It was a cathedral dressed in minimalism. White oak floors, a single long corridor. At the far end, a pair of glass doors parted on his approach, sensing a body, an appointment, a sacrifice. Claire Weston stood at the window with her back to him. She was smaller than her photographs, slender in a charcoal blazer cut to the millimeter, her dark hair pulled back so tightly It looked painful. On the wall to her right hung a single-framed photograph in black and white. An older man in a suit, shaking hands with someone off-frame, the kind of portrait a daughter hangs because she cannot let go. Ryan noticed it the way he noticed everything about rooms he did not belong in. "Mr. Callahan." Her voice, when it came, was quiet and precise. "Sit, please." He sat. She turned. Her eyes were the pale, careful blue of winter glass. No warmth in them, but no cruelty. Either only the terrible patience of a woman who had decided long before he walked in how the meeting would end. A folder already lay open on the desk between them. "7 months with us," she said. Performance reviews above expectation. Peer feedback strong. Code quality excellent. Her index finger slid down the page, neat as a blade. And yet, she turned the page. A second sheet. A grid of timestamps precise to the minute. "In 7 months, Mr. Callahan, you have logged 0 hours of voluntary overtime. You have declined every after-hours training. You have never once logged in over a weekend. You leave this building at 5:30 every single evening. Not 5:35. Not 5:29. 5:30. Ryan said nothing. "I'm curious," she said. "What exactly occupies your evenings?" He could have lied. Could have invented a second job, a night class, anything that sounded like ambition. Instead, he heard himself speak the truth very calmly. "My son." Something shifted in her face. Not surprise, not sympathy. Recognition. As though a box had just checked itself on a form he could not see. "Your son." "Noah. He is 6. He has asthma. His after-school program closes at 6:30. I pick him up at 6:15. She nodded once slowly and reached into the folder for a third sheet. The third sheet was a termination letter. It was already signed. She slid it across the desk with 2 fingers, the way a banker slides a receipt across a counter. Near the bottom, in a single line of cold font, the reason was printed. Insufficient demonstrated commitment to organizational excellence. Ryan read it once. The hum of the building's ventilation seemed for a second unbearably loud. "You are firing me," he said evenly, "because I pick up my son." "I am ending our employment relationship," she answered, "because next Lara requires a different kind of engineer than you have chosen to be." He lifted his eyes from the paper to her face. And what he saw there was the thing that would stay with him for the rest of his life. Not coldness, not contempt, but a thin and perfect emptiness. The look of a woman who had long ago stopped asking whether a thing was right, and only asked whether it was efficient. He thought of Noah at the stove that morning swinging his feet. He thought of Elaine 3 years gone, whose last whispered request had been take care of him. He thought of the 8 days until rent. And then he did the thing that he would replay 100 times in the nights to come. He did not beg. He did not argue. He did not reach for the lawyer's number folded into his wallet behind a photograph of his son. He stood slowly and picked up his coat from the back of the chair. Only then did he speak the sentence that Claire Weston would not be able to forget. "Ms. Weston, when you leave this office for the last time, I hope someone is waiting to walk you home." The window held fog and the far bridge and the pale afternoon light. For one long second, Claire Weston's reflection in the glass did not move. Then her shoulders just barely drew in as if something very small, something she had been holding for a very long time, had quietly slipped from her grip. Ryan did not wait to see what her face looked like when she turned around. He walked out through the glass doors down the long corridor into the elevator and pressed the button for the 22nd floor. His hands did not begin to shake until he was alone inside that falling steel box. He packed his desk into a single cardboard box, a coffee mug Noah had painted at a birthday party yellow glaze bleeding into the handle, a framed photograph of Elaine holding the baby, a spare inhaler kept in the drawer for emergencies, 3 co-workers watched him without speaking. One of them, a senior developer named Marcus, whose own daughter had just started kindergarten, stood up, halfway opened his mouth, and then sat back down. Ryan understood. In a place like Nextlara, you did not rise for the man who had been cut. You lowered your head and thanked whatever God you still believed in that it had not been you. He carried the box out through the lobby at 5:34. He was going to be late picking up Noah for the first time in 3 years. What Ryan did not know, what he could not possibly have known as the revolving doors spun him out into the cold San Francisco afternoon, was that on the 48th floor above him, a woman in a charcoal blazer was still standing at her window. She had not moved. She had not sat down. She had not called her assistant. She was staring at the framed black and white photograph of her father. And for the first time in 9 years, Claire Weston could not remember the sound of his voice. The after-school program at Roosevelt Elementary closed its gates at 6:30. At 6:11, Ryan's car pulled into the curb. Noah was sitting on the bench outside the office, with his backpack between his feet and a folded paper airplane in his lap. He looked up, saw the car, and smiled, the uncomplicated smile of a 6-year-old who has never, not once, been forgotten. "Daddy, you're late." "I know, buddy. I'm sorry." "It's okay. Miss Hannah let me fold planes." Ryan buckled him into the booster seat and for a long moment kept his forehead pressed against the top of the steering wheel, breathing through the tightness in his chest. Behind him, Noah was explaining something about wing angles. He did not tell his son that night. He made spaghetti with jarred sauce, read 2 chapters of a dinosaur book, checked that the rescue inhaler was on the nightstand, and the spacer was clean. And when the small body in the bed had finally gone heavy with sleep, Ryan walked out into the living room of apartment 207 and let himself feel for the first time the shape of what had happened. Termination. Effective immediately. He sat down at the kitchen table and opened the laptop. The numbers when he laid them out were not numbers so much as a countdown. Savings account $3,140. Rent $1,950 due in 8 days. Health insurance through Nextlara would end on the last day of the month, 9 days away. After that, Cobra was theoretically available, but the unsubsidized premium to cover both of them ran past $1,200 a month, more than half of what he would have left after rent. Without coverage, Noah's 2 inhalers came to roughly $400 a month at retail. The pulmonology follow-up on Friday, another $300 out of pocket. He did the math 3 times because the first 2 times he did not believe it. At the current burn rate with rent paid and no income, he had 37 days before the account went negative. He closed the laptop very carefully, as if it were something fragile. Then he put his face in his hands, and for the first time since Elaine's funeral, he cried. Quietly, with the bedroom door shut, the way a father cries when he has decided long ago that his son will never see him break. Morning came anyway. Ryan packed Noah's lunch, peanut butter sandwich, apple slices, a juice box, and walked him to school. He kissed the top of the small head at the front gate and waited until the backpack disappeared. Then he drove to the Oakland Public Library on 14th Street, parked in the 2-hour zone, and carried his laptop to a long oak table by the 2nd-floor window. The library had free Wi-Fi. His apartment still did too for now, but by noon, he had already opened a browser tab and canceled the home internet subscription to save $45 a month. Every dollar was a day. He rewrote his resume. He applied to 11 positions in 7 hours. Senior back-end engineer, infrastructure lead, platform reliability. He wrote cover letters that mentioned none of the truth and all of the skills. At one point, a woman at the next table opened a tin of tuna, and the smell made him realize he had not eaten. He went home with a bag of discount bread and a gallon of milk. He did this for 2 days. On the 2nd evening, after Noah had fallen asleep with his cheek against a stuffed dinosaur, Ryan sat on the edge of the bed and watched him breathe. The small chest rose and fell, each exhalation a quiet wheeze at the end. He thought about the inhalers. He thought about the pulmonology appointment in 4 days. He thought about Elaine and what she would have said, and he knew exactly what she would have said, because she had said it to him the week before she died. You don't get to quit being his father, Rye. Not ever. Not for anything. He turned off the lamp. He did not quit. At 10:12 on the morning of the 3rd day, while he was refreshing a job board at his library table, his phone buzzed against the wood. Unknown number. San Francisco area code. He almost did not answer. Mr. Callahan. The voice on the other end was a young woman's, crisp and rehearsed. This is Vanessa Holt, executive assistant to Ms. Weston. She would like to speak with you this afternoon at 2 o'clock, the 48th floor. A car can be sent if that is convenient. Ryan looked at the rain beginning on the window. He looked at the laptop screen where a job application for a logistics startup sat half finished. He looked at the cardboard box of belongings still sitting by his front door. No car, he said. I will drive myself. He took the same elevator. He passed floor 30, floor 35, floor 42. The same glass doors parted on the same cathedral of white oak. The same woman stood at the same window. What was different was her face when she turned around. Claire Weston looked as though she had not slept. The careful blue of her eyes was rimmed in red, and a single strand of her dark hair had escaped the tight knot at the back of her head. She did not sit behind the walnut desk. She gestured him instead to a pair of low chairs by the window, the way one gestures a guest, not an employee. Thank you for coming, Mr. Callahan. I almost did not. I know. A carafe of water stood on a low table between them. She poured 2 glasses with hands that were, Ryan noticed, not quite steady. I owe you an explanation, she said. And then I owe you something else. But the explanation first. She told him then. She told him that the termination had not been real, or rather, it had been entirely real on paper. Real enough to end his employment and void his insurance at the end of the month, but it had not been final. It had been in the internal vocabulary of Nexlara's people operations team, a pressure evaluation. A program that Claire herself had signed off on 18 months ago on the recommendation of a consulting firm her board had hired. A small number of employees, high performers, quiet ones who seemed to be holding something back, were called to the 48th floor and terminated with a false reason, their reactions measured against a rubric, their reinstatement offered within 72 hours on improved terms. Every participant who accepted reinstatement signed a non-disclosure agreement as part of the new contract. The stated purpose was to identify resilience. The actual effect, she said, her voice flattening on the word, was to see how much fear it took to break a person. 5 people had gone through the program before Ryan. 4 of them had begged. 1 had threatened a lawsuit, and then, when offered a raise and a director title, had accepted the reinstatement and signed the NDA with grateful tears. Ryan was the first person who had walked out of the room saying what he had said. As she spoke, something in Ryan's chest began to heat. Not the clean anger of a man who has been wronged, but a darker thing. A father's anger, the kind that understands exactly what it was willing to lose. So, when you looked at my son's name on your file, he said, his voice very quiet, you knew he had asthma. I had seen the benefits claims. Yes, you knew that ending my insurance at the end of this month meant he had less than 2 weeks before a single inhaler cost me more than groceries. I knew. And you knew I was the only parent he has. A silence then of a particular kind. The silence of an admission that had not yet been spoken. I knew, she said at last. I saw the death certificate in your file. I know your wife died 3 years ago. I know the funeral home. I know the cemetery. I know her maiden name. Ryan stood up. Ms. Weston, I do not know what you imagined would happen when you called me back here. I do not know what story you told yourself about my son's lungs and my wife's death being acceptable variables in your pressure evaluation. But you will not use my child as an experiment. Not for any salary. Not for any apology. Not ever. He was at the glass doors when she spoke. Mr. Callahan, please. He did not turn around, but he did not walk through the doors either. My father, she said, died 2 months before his retirement. The words spoken to his back stopped him in a way nothing else could have. He was the chief executive of a logistics company in Chicago, 35 years at the same firm. He was 64 years old. His retirement party was on the calendar. My mother had bought a house in Arizona. He had a stroke in his office on a Tuesday afternoon, and nobody found him for almost 2 hours because his assistant thought he was in a long meeting. Ryan's hand was still on the door. I found him, Claire said. I had driven in to bring him a sandwich because he had skipped lunch. He was on the floor behind his desk. The sandwich is still in my car somewhere. I never took it out. He turned finally because he had to. She was sitting in the low chair with her hands folded in her lap, and she was looking at the framed black and white photograph on the wall as though the man in it might this time answer. I built this company, she said, to be the thing my father would have been proud of. And somewhere between the first round of funding and the third cover story, I built it into the thing that killed him. I did not see it. I could not see it. Until a man I had fired for picking up his son said to me, "When you leave this office for the last time, I hope someone is waiting to walk you home." Her eyes came back to his, and for the first time, there was nothing winter in them at all. There is no one, Mr. Callahan. There has not been anyone for a very long time. I sleep in this building 3 nights a week. I have a penthouse in Pacific Heights that my decorator chose. My mother in Arizona has not heard my voice in 4 months. I am 34 years old, and I have built an empire that eats people, and I didn't understand that I was one of the people it was eating. Ryan did not sit, but he did not leave. I am not asking you to forgive me, she said. I am asking you to do something harder. She stood up. I am offering you a position, not your old one, a new one. Senior culture advisor, reporting directly to me with the authority to audit every policy in this company and recommend changes that I will be obligated to implement or publicly explain why I have not. Your salary will be $240,000 a year. Your insurance will be reinstated today, backdated to Monday, so that nothing in your son's care is interrupted, and you will leave this building at 5:30 every single evening. It will be written into your contract. Ryan's throat closed. $240,000 a year. It was almost twice what he had been earning. It was enough to move Noah into a 2-bedroom. It was enough to stop praying before every pharmacy trip. It was also the offer of a woman who 3 days ago had tried to see how much fear it took to break him. Why me? He said. Because 4 people begged. 1 threatened, then took the raise. You looked at me like I was a person who still had time to change. No one has spoken to me like a person in 9 years, Mr. Callahan. I do not know how to fix what I have built. But I know I cannot fix it alone. And I know I cannot fix it with anyone who is afraid of me. I have a chief product officer named Jordan Price, who has been telling me for 2 years that we are losing people faster than we are hiring them. I have not listened to him. I want to start listening. But I cannot start with him. I need to start with someone who has already paid the price of this place. He stood at the glass doors for a long time. He thought of Noah at the stove. He thought of Elaine's voice saying, "You don't get to quit being his father." He thought of the 37 days and the $400 inhalers and the small chest rising and falling in the dark. And he thought of the look on Claire Weston's face when he had turned back, which was not the look of a billionaire offering a deal. It was the look of a daughter who had found her father on a floor. "I have conditions," he said. "Name them." "The program ends today." Every person it has touched gets a written apology signed by you and the option of severance if they choose to leave. The NDAs are voided. No more pressure evaluations. Ever. Done. I leave at 5:30. If there is a meeting that cannot be moved, it waits until morning. Done. And Ms. Weston. His voice was very even now. If I come back into this building, it will not be to fix your company first. It will be to fix you first. Because a company run by a woman who is still bleeding will bleed on everyone it touches. You do not get to outsource your healing to me. You do the work yourself, or I walk out of this room and I never come back. And no salary on earth will change that. For the first time since he had met her, Claire Weston smiled. It was a small, broken, grateful smile. Done, she said. Mr. Callahan, done. The 48th floor looked different when Ryan walked onto it as an employee. It was the same white oak, the same long corridor, the same wall of windows holding the bay like a held breath. But on his first morning, a new nameplate had been installed beside a small office, 2 doors down from Claire's Ryan Callahan Senior Culture Advisor. And on the desk sat a single framed photograph that a courier had delivered that morning. Noah grinning, holding up a paper airplane. Claire had sent it. He did not ask how she had found it. The first thing he did was not sit in the office. For 3 months, Ryan carried a notebook through every floor of Next Lara. He ate in the cafeteria on 12. He sat in on stand-ups on 19. He booked 30-minute coffees with engineers, with designers, with salespeople, with the women in the legal department who ate lunch at their desks, and the young men in product who slept 3 nights a week on couches in the back conference rooms. He did not use a recorder. He wrote by hand, because he had learned long ago that a person will tell you a different kind of truth when they are watching the words being put down. Jordan Price, the chief product officer Claire had mentioned, sought Ryan out in the cafeteria on the 2nd week. He was a tall, careful man in his early 40s, who had 2 teenagers at home, and the face of someone who had stopped sleeping well around the time the younger one turned 10. "Whatever you are building," he said over coffee, "I will back it. I have been trying to change this place for 2 years. I think she finally heard you because you were not trying to save your job when you said it." Ryan wrote that down too. What he heard week after week was not surprising. What was surprising was that no one at the top of the company had ever bothered to hear it. A senior designer named Rachel, who had not taken a vacation in 2 years, told him she had missed the birth of her sister's first child because a product launch had been scheduled on the same weekend. "I did not even ask to move the launch," she said. I knew the answer. A data scientist named Daniel, whose wife had filed for divorce the previous March, told him that on the night she left, he had been in the office until 2 in the morning because a dashboard had broken, and he was afraid of what Claire would say if it was still broken by 9. "She never said anything actually," he said. "I do not think she ever looked at the dashboard." Marcus. The same Marcus who had half risen from his desk on Ryan's last day on the 22nd floor sat across from him in a quiet conference room and finally said the thing he had not said 3 months earlier. "I have a 5-year-old, Ryan. I have not put her to bed on a weeknight since she was 2. Ryan wrote it all down. He wrote down, too, the things nobody said out loud. The way people flinched when an email arrived after 9 at night. The way no one ate lunch away from a screen. The way the single mother in accounting kept a cot folded under her desk because her babysitter charged double after 7. At the end of the 3rd month, he sat down at the kitchen table of apartment 207 with Noah asleep in the next room, and he wrote a 60-page report. He called it, "What We Have Been Eating." He placed it on Claire's desk on a Monday morning and sat down in the chair across from her. She read the whole thing without speaking. It took her almost 2 hours. Ryan did not leave. He watched her face move through it, the tightening at the jaw, the single hand that came up to cover her mouth on page 31. the long stillness at the section titled, "The Mother Under the Desk." When she finally closed the folder, her eyes were wet. "This is not a report," she said. "This is an indictment. It is both. What do you want me to do? I want you to do the one thing you wrote into my contract that I could ask of you." He slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. On it were 3 lines handwritten. "Leave this building at 6 in the evening. Take both weekend days. Do not open email between 10 at night and 7 in the morning." Claire looked at the paper for a long time. "Ryan, I have not done any of these things in 12 years. I know. The company will survive. The question is whether you will." Her hand, when it reached for the paper, was not steady. But it did reach. Starting when? Starting tonight. She failed on the first night. He knew, because at 10:47 his phone buzzed with a company email she had sent to the product team. He did not scold her. The next morning he walked into her office and set a small object on her desk, a cheap kitchen timer, the kind with a dial that he had bought at a drugstore on his way in. "Wind it to 6, he said. "When it rings, you stand up. You put on your coat. You walk out. That is the entire skill. You do not have to feel ready. You have to move your body." She looked at the plastic timer on her desk, and for a second, she laughed. It was the first time he had ever heard her laugh. She wound it to 6. And at 6 o'clock that evening when it rang, she stood up, and she put on her coat, and she walked out. It did not transform her in a week, or in a month. These things do not transform people in a month. What it did was begin. By the end of the 2nd month after the report landed on her desk, Claire had promoted Jordan Price from Chief Product Officer to Chief Operating Officer, which meant for the first time since the founding of Nextlara that there was a second set of shoulders the company could rest on. She took a Saturday off, then a Sunday, then a whole weekend. She called her mother in Arizona and cried on the phone for 40 minutes, and afterward she told Ryan that her mother had said, "Claire, honey, I have been waiting 9 years for you to call me like that." By the end of the 3rd month, Nextlara had a published policy. No meetings after 5, no emails between 10 at night and 7 in the morning, protected parental hours built into every team's calendar. 2 mid-level managers quit in protest. 1 board member resigned. Claire wrote a public letter explaining the changes, signed her name to it, and did not apologize. The productivity numbers which the board had predicted would collapse held, and then quietly began to climb. Retention climbed 35% in 6 months. A business magazine, the same magazine that had put her on a cover at 29 under the headline, "The Woman Who Does Not Sleep," put her on a cover again at 35. The new headline was one word: awake. Ryan kept his promise to leave at 5:30. Most evenings, he picked Noah up from the after-school program at 6:15 and drove back across the bridge with the radio low and the small voice in the back seat narrating the day. On Fridays, they got pizza from the place on Grand Avenue that Elaine had loved. On Sundays, they threw a baseball in the park until Noah's arm got tired, and they sat on the bench and shared a bag of peanuts. Claire came to Noah's school music performance the following May. She did not announce that she was coming. Ryan had mentioned it in passing, the way one mentions a small thing to a colleague. And on the evening of the performance, in the half-dark of the school auditorium, he turned around in his seat and saw her slipping into the back row. She was in jeans. He had never seen her in jeans. Her hair was down, and she was holding a small paper program in both hands, the way a woman holds something she has never been given before. Noah was in the second row of the children, a small boy in a white shirt, singing a song about the sun coming up in a voice that cracked twice on the high notes. When it was over, Claire stood in the aisle with her hands in her back pockets and said, "Ryan, I have never been in a room like this. A school. A room full of people who are not here for work." He introduced her to Noah, who looked up with enormous eyes and said, "You're the lady my dad works for." "I am," she said. "My dad says you have a hard job." "I used to. I am learning to have an easier one." Afterward, the three of them went to the ice cream shop 2 blocks from the school. Claire ordered a scoop of strawberry, which was the flavor she had eaten as a child in Chicago before her father's career had taken the family into a life where dessert was an afterthought. She ate it on a bench under a street light with a little boy on one side of her and his father on the other. And when the cone was finished, she sat there for a long time without speaking. Ryan did not ask what she was thinking. He already knew. She was thinking that her own father had never once in 64 years sat on a bench at 7 in the evening eating strawberry ice cream. 5 years later, the campus had changed. So had the city. So had the boy. Noah was 11, almost 12, taller than his father's shoulder, and he had not had a serious asthma attack in 2 years. The 2-bedroom apartment in Alameda had a small yard, and in the yard, there was a baseball glove that was beginning to wear soft around the thumb. Nexlara had been written up in business schools at Harvard and Stanford as the central case study in a new kind of corporate culture. The kind where, as one professor dryly put it, people came home before their children fell asleep. Claire Weston had stepped down as chief executive the previous year, handing the company to Jordan Price and taking a seat on the board. She had bought a small house in Vermont. She was improbably learning to paint landscapes. She was bad at it. She painted every weekend anyway. On a morning in late April, Ryan and Noah were throwing a baseball in the park 2 blocks from their apartment. The light came down through the new leaves in the way that California light does in spring, long and gold and a little bit forgiving. Noah caught a low throw, straightened, turned the ball in his glove. "Dad." "Yeah, bud, if you had known. On the day she fired you. If somebody had told you, hey, it's going to be okay, she's going to hire you back. You're going to be fine. Would you have done it different? Would you have, asked for more money? Or yelled or something?" Ryan thought about it for about 1 second. "No, not even a little. Not even a little, buddy." "Why not?" He looked at his son, at the long legs that had once been a small chest, rising and falling in the dark, at the unguarded face that had inherited Elaine's eyes, at the boy who had been the reason he left a building at 5:30 every single day of his working life. "Because what I said in that room." "Noah," I said, "because I meant it. And if I had known the ending, I might have said it for the ending. And then I would not have meant it anymore." The boy considered this the way 11-year-olds consider things with his whole face. "That makes sense." Yeah. He wound up and threw the ball back. Ryan caught it in the soft pocket of his glove, turned it once in his hand, and threw it back into the morning. The worth of a life he had learned on a desk on the 48th floor 5 years earlier, and had spent every day since proving, was not in the title printed on a door or the number printed on a check. It was in what a man chose to say, and what he chose not to beg for when everything he loved was on the line. The ball arced up. Noah caught it. Somewhere across the country, a woman in a paint-stained shirt stood at a window in Vermont and watched the light change on a hillside, and for the first time in her life, did not reach for her phone. And the morning went on.